to wait for another couple of seconds. Yes! My clock says 8 o'clock.
Cool. Works for me. All right. Thank you all for coming to my talk. I'm going to be talking about SourceCred. Just a bit about myself. My name is Dandelion, and I'm the temporary benevolent dictator of SourceCred. So we're taking the classic open source model, but explicitly making it a temporary thing.
Hello.
I use they, them pronouns. Oh well. So I've heard a bit about SourceCred. It's basically a social algorithm for measuring valued contributions. And it's a crypto economic system for then paying those contributors. So it's getting used now by a couple different projects. For example, SourceCred and MetaGame. And I'm going to actually ask that other people mute because I'm hearing just a fair amount of people kind of moving around in their chairs and such. So please just unmute yourself if you're actively asking a question. So let's talk first about the social algorithm. So the origin of SourceCred is basically, I was hanging out with my friend Juan Benet, who is the CEO of Protocol Labs. And Protocol Labs is developing cryptocurrencies like Filecoin. And those projects are themselves depending on other open source projects that they're sponsoring, like IPFS and libp2p. And then of course on the rest of the whole open source ecosystem. And so given that they are making cryptocurrencies, Juan was asking, why can't we just use cryptocurrencies, which are open source projects, to then pay all of the other open source we depend on? So we kind of started brainstorming about how to pay people in open source. And you get your objective metrics, like could we pay per commit?
I'm sharing my screen. Does everyone see it?
Code?
Can you hear me?
Sorry, I think you, are you trying to present here? Because I think you might be in the wrong.
Cool. I guess I'll just
who's
get
trying
started.
to share the screen?
Great, thanks a lot.
Okay.
I'm on this presentation screen, so I can't see the chat or anything like that. Let me know if you have questions. My name is James Waugh. I'm here to represent the Rare Art Festival and hopefully inspire collaboration between the meta community and the crypto art world.
James?
Wait for a moment.
To get started,
There
I've got
seem to be two
take it
speakers
back
in
to
the
the
house.
OG Rare Art Festival, which was my first experience at a
I don't think he can hear us.
crypto-related conference, and it blew my mind.
Can the
I was
moderator?
never interested in
Yeah,
Bitcoin, but Ethereum really caught my eye because of all of the creative use cases. Like CryptoKitties came around, and there was CryptoPunks, and then all these crypto art platforms started popping up. And there's a gathering in New York called the Rare Digital Art Festival in January, like right at the peak of craziness. It was actually, I think, 2 weeks after the all-time high of Ethereum. We had this gathering. It was packed, like not even standing room only. Ways to use crypto and blockchain for art and other creative use cases like games or any sort of collectibles. So that led to a lot of different opportunities for people. Just wanted to
I don't really know what to do about this.
Just tweeted about it a few weeks before the event happened, and it came together organically, sort of like the InterCon.
Hold on.
And then there's Mac Flavel.
Call is a place for beta testers to figure out what the heck they're doing with the app. So
and by Dada, which is super cool. If you haven't checked out their platform, it's a great example of collaboration happening in the crypto art space. Just wanted to share a few pictures. We had an auction at the end of the day and sold this Bacchus Pepe on the left for $500 worth of crypto. And then we had Simon de la Riviere talking about radical arts and all kinds of fun legal issues and political issues. Got Austin Griffith handing out collectibles like the burner wallet, the paper wallets, but these are for NFTs. It was really cool to see him like build that and launch it within a week, like during NYC Blockchain Week. Jason Bailey, who's our keynote speaker, is one of the leaders of the crypto art space. He writes a blog and he's a curator, and you can check him out at Artnome, ARTNOME. I forget what domain it is, but I think it's .com. You can just Google it. We had some cool swag as well. Some participants in the Create-a-thon. They're drawing and it's really anything goes. It's no budget, completely organized by the community, and led to some really awesome collaboration happening IRL. More swag here. You can see DJ Pepe on the bottom right. He's the DJ of one of the performers of the after party. We had a few others as well, including John Block, the musician. And here's a list of the speakers. I'll just leave it on the screen for a minute. We had a ton of representatives, many from the original Rare Art Festival, and some even had new projects they were presenting.
All right, you got 7 people in here.
Okay, yeah. How long should we wait? I mean, I think there was like 30 in the room when I started talking in the other spot, so I guess we haven't had everyone make it over.
Oh,
Yeah, well, yeah, very, very, very strange one. You wouldn't really expect that.
Hey, is it working now?
It seems to be. At least we can't hear James now, so
We can't what?
we're not hearing James anymore from the other room, so it seems better.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good. That's really weird. I think it's some Jitsi bug. It
Yeah,
can join
what
both of those rooms. It's a glitch in the space-time continuum.
Yeah, either that or there was some user that was like in both rooms and was like looping the audio or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Okay. We are back in the call.
okay, should we restart now, do you
I
think?
think
Yeah.
it's best to restart. Sorry for that. We had a speaker just had both tabs open, and so you can hear, of course, obviously, his voice in both rooms. Okay. Dandelion, please start again with the SourceCred talk.
Cool. And Angela, if you could just, while I'm talking, if people are transmitting or
you're
like random
muted. We
noises,
can't
could you
hear
just
you.
mute them? Oh, you can't hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Can anyone?
I can hear you.
Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Peter, you said you can hear me? Okay, so Angela, it might just be you that can't hear me.
No. Can anybody hear
Yeah,
Dandelion?
I think you have a
Yeah, I
problem.
hear him.
Okay. So it seems to be on my side.
Okay, so we're
All right,
we're
go
learning the
ahead,
gist of a
Dandelion. Sorry, I will fix
lots to
this
be
on my
desired
side.
as a digital conferencing. Okay, well, in any case, let's get back to business here. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to start over from the beginning, but I'll move at kind of a faster pace. I'm Dandelion. I'm presenting on SourceCred. It's basically a social algorithm for measuring contributions, and it assigns cred scores. Well, you can call the scores anything you want. And then it's a crypto economic system for paying the contributors with incentives, with reasons for rational participants to want to fund the commons. So you might know it in the context of SourceCred. We call the scores cred, and we call the tokens grain. But for example, MetaGame is using SourceCred and having its own MetaGame flavor. So the scores are called XP and the tokens are called seeds. I'm just going to go through kind of how the mechanics of SourceCred work. So it's a social algorithm. In terms of its origins, we kind of started from the point of just being able to pay open source contributors using cryptocurrencies. So I was hanging out with my friend Juan, who's the CEO of Protocol Labs, and they sponsor a bunch of open source work like IPFS and libp2p, and then they depend on the rest of the open source ecosystem, so projects like Go, Node, and everything. And Protocol Labs is in the business of making cryptocurrencies, most notably Filecoin. And so I was talking to Juan about like, why couldn't Protocol Labs just pay everyone in crypto? Like, why do they need to hire engineers? Why do they need to depend on all of this volunteer labor? If we're actually making money with open source projects, shouldn't we be able to fund open source development too? And the issue is figuring out how to pay people in a way that's robust to gaming. So you might want to start with objective metrics. You'll say, we'll pay per commit, we'll pay per line of code. And these are all basically counters. You know, you're counting the number of times some kind of activity happens. And the problem with counters is that they're really easy to game. It's just way too easy to make a ton of, typo fixing commits or just re-indent the whole code base to, refactor something in a way that doesn't produce a lot of value, but does game these metrics. And so you might turn from there to subjective approaches. You might say, let's have the contributors review each other. Let's give a rating to each contribution. Maybe we'll have like a council rating each pull request. And the problem with these approaches are that one, they're very easily biased. It's very easy to have it just succumb to an in-group that's deciding how much everyone gets rewarded. And because of that, it doesn't scale very well past Dunbar's number. If it's a small group, you can probably go with a very subjective approach, but once it gets large, you start to have these weird cliques forming, it starts to become very political, and it doesn't scale. So SourceCred's approach basically is to build off this really cool algorithm called Pagerank. You might have heard of Pagerank because Google, the Google founders came up with it and then built Google based on the power of this idea. It's an algorithm for assigning scores to nodes in a graph, where the score of every node is based on the score of the nodes that linked to it. So in this example, we might imagine that these are web pages, and maybe B is a web page like Wikipedia that gets linked to all over. C is maybe some web page that's only referenced once, but it's referenced by this very trustworthy website. And then these little teal nodes are maybe like spam websites that nobody ever linked to. And a naive algorithm, E would get the most score because it has the most connections from all of these spam websites. But with PageRank, the spam websites get very little score. And so the score tends to accumulate at trustworthy sources. We're taking this idea and applying it instead to contributions. So we say, okay, what if every single contribution if this feature is a feature that no one ever uses, then we're not going to mint very much cred to it. It's not going to be a source of much cred. And so writing the pull request that implemented the feature no one used won't get you much reward. And so it gets robustness to this kind of spammy attacks where people are just putting in lots of low value effort. And this mixture of being objective and also community curated makes it intersubjective. It means that this system is starting with the kind of like objective ground truth of our project, but it is mixing in the values and perspective of the community that's running the algorithm. And I think intersubjectivity in general is really powerful. It's really something we should be aiming for, because when we're building intersubjective systems, it means we're building social systems, and social systems are what makes us successful as a species. It's what makes our economies work. It's what makes our political systems work. So I'll go over a couple properties of cred. The first thing to know is it's totally community specific. We're not imagining some global cred network where everyone is being evaluated based on the same rubric. That winds up really looking dystopian, really looking like, maybe China's social credit system. Maybe it looks like the Black Mirror episode Nosedive. But in any case, it's not what we're going for. And that's why, for example, MetaGame EXP is a totally separate system from SourceCred cred. Cred is minted. So what that means is that, as we define this graph, we're defining how cred will flow, but the cred has to start somewhere. And that choice of where cred starts is going to be really important. So for example, we could say, we value pull requests, so we're going to mint some cred for every pull request. And that, might be a reasonable starting point, but maybe it's an issue. Maybe you have people then come and open a bunch of, empty pull requests just to mint cred for themselves. So you kind of want to have cred get minted at some point in the graph where you're really confident that a valuable contribution has been made. So an example would be minting cred for merged pull requests would be more robust than for pull requests in general, because pull requests need to be reviewed before they merge. Minting cred for liked forum posts would be more robust than minting cred for forum posts in general. But minting cred for stuff like features, where there's an explicit step of community review saying, yes, this feature was something we cared about, is going to be the most robust of all. Cred is also retroactively updating. So it's always changing. And what that means is, let's imagine that you go and you create a feature, and this feature is actually brilliant. It's like a really important API. Maybe it enables performance improvements. But at the time that you worked on this, no one else recognized that it was very important. And so you didn't get a lot of cred for it because other people weren't depending on it. Other people weren't sponsoring it. You don't actually have to worry about that too much, because if you're right and the thing you built actually is really valuable, then your cred will retroactively update, because in the future, people will start depending on it, and then the algorithm will just kind of flow more cred to you for your past work because it's now clearly valuable. And what this means is that in SourceCred, you don't need to be like paranoid every week, like, oh no, is my stuff getting fairly valued? You can just focus on building stuff that really matters and kind of trust that the system will come around eventually. Cred is also non-transferable. So in the same way that like a scientist can't transfer the cred that they have for having come up with big discoveries, you can't transfer the cred you have for the work you've done. It's directly tied to your identity. Finally, it's totally configurable. This is an open source project, and every project that's using it is just running their own instance. And so they can choose what the rules are. They can choose what the data sources are. They can choose what the heuristics are. And so the idea is every community will be just tuning it to suit their needs. Now, really astute question you might be asking is, isn't the PageRank algorithm quite gameable? Isn't the system just going to be fall prey to spam and gaming and attacks? And the short answer is yes, PageRank is gameable. It does have, it's got some amount of Sybil resistance for the reasons I talked about, that Sybil nodes will probably not have a lot of score. But for a motivated opponent, you will find ways to game PageRank. And this is not the end of the world for SourceCred, because we can depend on moderation. And I think it's important to note that gameability is a property of social systems in general. If you think about the social system of having an election or the social system of getting promoted in a company, there are ways to game all of these systems. If you spend a lot of time like sucking up to your bosses and like, sending out company-wide emails in which you seem to be really on top of things, maybe you can game getting promotions, even if you're not that talented. If you are really good at like, obfuscating the press and getting free attention, maybe you'll do really well in elections, even if you're not a very competent candidate. But the fact that a system has vulnerability to gaming doesn't mean it's broken. It just means it needs good moderation. And so on the SourceCred front, we're focused on making SourceCred scores really transparent so the communities that are using SourceCred can moderate those scores effectively. I like to think of it as incentive vulnerabilities. If there's some way to get a lot of cred without actually contributing value, that's an incentive vulnerability. And I think of this as being kind of like a software vulnerability. And what we've seen from software is that a good way to approach vulnerabilities is to do stuff like responsible disclosure, have lots of eyes on the code, have everyone able to like be looking for ways to attack it, and then looking for ways to make it robust. And in SourceCred's experience, just ourselves, we've seen a couple of these sort of like soft attacks come up. Nobody has actively attacked SourceCred as far as I know, but we've seen like incentive misalignments where we were minting cred for every discourse post. And that just made it way too incentivized to make a lot of posts that other people weren't reading a lot. And so we changed it. So we no longer mint cred to posts, and instead we mint cred when posts get likes, which was a bit more robust. And so I think there's going to be a long iterative process of like discovering ways that people can get too much cred and then working together as a community to fix them. This brings me to Grain, a cred-based token. This is kind of where the crypto economics come into SourceCred. So the first thing to know about Grain is it's a token, like an ERC20 token, and it gets earned by contributors with a retroactive catch-up. So the basic idea is that we're going to give you Grain in proportion to your lifetime cred. And so if you did a lot of work 6 months ago and it didn't earn a lot of cred at the time because people didn't really see how important it was, and then just today everyone like wakes up and was like, whoa, your contribution, that was actually amazing, and your cred score goes up, then you will get a bunch of Grain today as well to kind of make up for your in the SourceCred model, what I could do is I could buy a bunch of Grain in that project, and I could use it to sponsor my bug that I care about. That means that my bug will suddenly become worth a lot of cred, which means that all of the contributors in the project will be incentivized to care about my priorities. And so in that sense, as a sponsor, I'm able to incentivize other people in the project to work on the stuff that I think is important. And this is just from an economic perspective, exactly the model that we should expect, which is that if you're willing to spend money, if you're willing to fund the project, then the project should care about what your needs are. Sponsors are also incentivized to sponsor because, remember, they're going to get a share of cred in stuff that they sponsor. So if I see that there's a really important issue, maybe it'll benefit me a little bit to fix it, but will also benefit all of the other users of the project. If I sponsor it and cause it to get fixed, then that contribution will earn a lot of cred if I'm right that it will benefit the other users as well. And so I actually have the potential, because I'm earning so much cred, to actually get back more grain than I put in as a sponsor. So it essentially creates an incentivized model for sponsoring the commons, because you do get reward if you are sponsoring valuable initiatives. And in that sense, you can think of sponsorship as providing decentralized management. One of the major things that management in a company does is they allocate scarce resources in ways that will benefit the organization. But it's a very centralized permission structure where you have to get the permission of the CEO, you need to get hired, you need to be given budget or headcount. And in the sponsorship model, anyone can decide to become a manager if they just put in the capital. And if they do a good job, they will get more cred, which leads to more grain, which means to more influence. And if they do a bad job, then they'll just kind of disappear, having sponsored a bunch of unimportant contributions. But either way, they're paying the contributors. Finally, we can think of SourceCred as a protocol. And that comes from the fact that it has a plugin architecture and the fact that its underlying data model, that of contribution graphs, is extremely simple. So we already have a bunch of plugins already. We've got a GitHub plugin that automatically creates a graph from your issues, your pull requests, your comments, your reviews. We've got a discourse plugin that creates a graph from your posts, your likes, your topics on a discourse forum. And there's an initiative plugin which allows you to kind of manually add in important work that maybe is like project management, or maybe is whole little sub projects. Maybe it's organizing a conference. Basically anything that you can't discover automatically from GitHub or Discourse, you can encode manually using the initiative plugin. We've also got a couple plugins under development. We've got a working prototype of a Discord plugin, which we're kind of collaborating with MetaGame on. And I believe Raid Guild is working on a Telegram plugin, although it's in early stages. And for example, for the Discord plugin, the idea is that you can have certain reactions mint cred, so that everyone in the project, if you have a channel called #did-a-thing, someone can post in that channel saying, hey, I just went and deployed a new version of the website. And then if people in the community think it's valuable, they can give reactions to that comment, and that will mint and flow some cred to the contributor. The other thing I'll mention is we have an identity resolution system that's cross-plugin. So for example, if you do some of your contributions on GitHub, some of them on Discourse, you also have a Discord, you can just bind all of your identities together. So you'll get a single cred score, regardless of what platform you were using to contribute. If you wanted to write a plugin, it's basically a 4-step system. You need to, 1, figure out what your contributions are and add a node for each contribution. 2, figure out how contributions are connected to each other and add an edge in the graph for each connection. 3, you'll also need your contributor nodes, so you just add nodes for them as well. 4, you need to decide which contributions are going to mint cred. So what are kind of the sources of cred? And maybe that would be merged pull requests, maybe it would be completed bounties, maybe it'd be GitHub releases, but it's basically up to you to decide which contributions you're going to trust as sources of cred. And if you want to learn more about the technical details, we've got a YouTube video on the SourceCred plugin system that is just kind of a walkthrough of the different pieces of a plugin at a code level. Yeah, that's it for my presentation. I invite you to come drop by the SourceCred Discord if you want to ask any questions. We also have a community call every Tuesday at 7 p.m. CET or 11 a.m. Pacific. And with that, I will switch to questions and answers.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dandelion. And just to let everybody know, so the next talk, which should have started at 8:30, has been moved to another room, so we have enough time to answer on all questions. So feel free to reach out to Dandelion. now.
Oh yeah, and I will share the link to the talk. That's right.
Thank you.